Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by James Dorado, VP of Data at a pretty awesome organization in New York City. They're a fintech and loyalty rewards platform, and the first company to allow you to earn rewards on rent, how you earn rewards at home in your neighborhood, and travel. They have raised a ton of money over the last few years. We're talking hundreds of millions to a $3 billion plus valuation, and founded in summer of 2021. And James is here. He's going to be talking a little bit about building out a data strategy at a fast growth product company. So I'm really looking to getting into this one and getting some good learnings from you, James, on what that experience has been like. First and foremost, thanks for joining us from New York.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elliot. Great to be here. Thanks for the kind words and the great intro. But yeah, looking forward to talking some data.
Love it. Give us a bit of a background into you first, and then set the scene on Bilt and almost double down on what I've said so far.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so, like many people who find themselves, I think, leading data teams these days, it is not how I started my career or where I really intended to be. Um, uh, Going all the way back to undergrad, I was an econ major, which I think is what a lot of people do when they're not really sure what they want to do. Um, but studied economics and finance, came out into the working world in a startup environment. Um, was somewhere for about 18 months, kind of cut my teeth, learned a bunch of things, finance, ops, supply chain, wear a lot of hats. Then went to another company called Boxed, an e-commerce startup, which was kind of disrupting that space. Was the second finance hire there, helped build out the team. Once again, wore a lot of hats, finance, accounting, fundraising, financial modeling, you name it, accounting system migrations. But all the while was kind of doing data as what I like to call my side hustle. So finance was the day job. Data was like nights and weekends, like, oh, I'll learn this SQL thing. Oh, I'll learn some Python. Let me figure out how to pull these numbers so I can even build a model. Um, and I found that I really enjoyed it. I just was naturally drawn to it. Um, Over the years, I just kind of became the de facto data lead at Boxed and eventually pivoted out of finance, started the data team, kind of brought analysts, data engineers, and data scientists under one kind of house, and built out that function. Moving on from Boxed, I was part of a spinoff of Boxed called Spresso AI, which basically packaged Box core technology and data capabilities and sold it to other e-commerce retailers as a SaaS solution. And then I continued my journey and landed here at Bilt back in January of 2024. Um, and, you know, kind of inherited what I would say was a solid foundation at Bilt, but somewhere where, we had not really invested a ton in data. And so, in terms of tools, personnel, processes, all those things. So, it was a really exciting opportunity. I think Built has an amazing business model. It's an amazing, fast growth, dynamic environment. And it's obviously disrupting the $700 billion rental market in the US. So, talking a little bit more about, I guess, Built the business model, the founding mission, and all of that. Um, you know, First company to ever allow you to earn rewards on rent, which is huge. So, $700 billion market in the US alone. Pretty much all goes on the old school payment rails, ACH, cash, check. Um, we have all had those landlords that only accept checks, and it can be quite annoying when you're, in the modern era, using a great credit card like a Chase Sapphire, Reserve or an Amex Platinum to earn rewards on everything else that you spend on, dining, travel, etc. it is kind of puzzling when you step back to say, hey, why can I not put my largest expense, housing, on a modern payment rail and earn rewards, right? You're missing out on a ton of value there. So, Ankur, our CEO, he came up with this idea many, many years ago. It was kind of in stealth for several years before he even really brought it to market. And officially came into being in 2021, and then really took off in 2022 when we launched our co-brand card with Wells Fargo. That really accelerated our growth. Having a powerful backing of Wells Fargo and MasterCard allowed us to become really a household name. A lot of people went out and got the card and started earning rewards on rent, which was a great starting point, but it was really just that. It was a starting point. Since then, we've really kind of grown into the platform that everyone will go to really kind of make payments against their home. And what I mean by that is not just rent, but soon mortgages, and condos and HOA charges as well. And so we really want to kind of integrate with all those legacy platforms in order to enable anyone, not just Bilt cardholders, to earn rewards on their rent. And so we're doing that by kind of building out what we call the Bilt Alliance, which is a network of millions of units across the country where we are the preferred payment platform if you live in those buildings, as well as continuing to grow the card business. And that allows anyone to pay rent on and earn rewards using that card. And that's kind of the home bucket of what we like to call, this kind of three-pronged strategy we have at Bilt: home, neighborhood, and travel. We start with the home. That's where the biggest spend is. We want to capture that. We want to let you earn rewards on that. Then we expand to the area immediately surrounding your home. One really powerful statistic that's helped guide our business model is that 80% of your spend occurs within 15 miles of your home. So if you can capture the businesses immediately surrounding your home, you've got this really powerful network effect. And so we view the home, whether you live in a single family home, you own your home, or whether you live in a large apartment building in a city, run by a property manager, that home base becomes a really big hub for being able to say to the merchants in that area, hey, this is where James lives, and here's where he spends most of his time and money. Being able to kind of say, hey, you can now target with certain incentives and, create this kind of flywheel effect in that neighborhood, right? So the natural kind of first step there was we went out and partnered with a lot of restaurants. We've got about 20 to 30,000 restaurants now in our network. And anytime you dine at one of those as a Bilt member, you earn rewards, whether you use your Bilt card or a linked card. And it's a really powerful thing for the merchants because they are now kind of capturing incremental spend from the people that live in their neighborhood and getting some additional insights on that customer. And it's also valuable for the property manager because they can also kind of get in on that action, right? And basically say, hey, we can effectively refer our residents to these merchants, and do things like, hey, we want you to renew your lease early rather than just give you a traditional concession, which might be cash, it might be a gift card. We could say, hey, you can get, an exclusive rewards rate at a local restaurant or an exclusive reservation or dining experience, for example. So that kind of is the neighborhood prong, and restaurants is the first kind of vertical there, but we very much view it as being able to go into other verticals like pharmacy. We have now a large partnership with Walgreens, as well as like gas, grocery, etc., and really kind of flesh out all the major spend categories. The third bucket is really travel, right? So a lot of these, kind of methods of earning rewards at home and in your neighborhood allow you to accumulate all these Bilt points. Now, what do you do with them, right? Well, travel redemption is usually the highest value category. A lot of strong programs like Amex and Chase Travel have really attractive redemption rates, really good ability to transfer into other programs. And we've modeled Bilt after those best in class programs, but we're kind of going even a leg further by being able to provide, additional value, additional flexibility. So whether you book through our Bilt kind of travel platform, or you transfer to a partner, we always want to ensure that you're getting the most value for your points. And now for several years running, we've won awards that basically say, independent press saying Bilt point is the most valuable currency in terms of points out there. So it's obviously great. We've got a lot of fans in that kind of credit card community, and it's been great to see. So that's kind of what home, neighborhood, and travel looks like for us. And going forward, we're growing rapidly. Like I said, our main goal right now is continue expanding the footprint in that kind of core home bucket. We do that by just signing more property managers and growing from millions of units to tens of millions of units, onboarding mortgage servicers and things like that, and really capturing share in the home market. Same thing on the merchant side. And we really want to just kind of continue to build out that flywheel effect, where whether you are a end user, a property manager, or a merchant, you are incentivized to participate in this Bilt ecosystem, and everyone gets rewarded in some way. So it is truly a win-win-win. But yeah, that's Bilt in a nutshell. Obviously, could talk about it all day.
Of course.
But yeah.
I think from when we first chatted, I thought it was such a good idea. I was encapsulated by the idea, but to see the level of growth in the last 3 years and how you're scaling out to millions of units, even integrating like beyond just rental units and into mortgage providers. It's such a smart idea that's being done at some real pace. So I'm buzzing to have you guys here. One question I'd love to understand is, even before you walked through the doors on January, why do you think Bilt needed to hire someone like you at that VP of data level to really bring everything under, as you were saying before about some of the stuff that you've done at Espresso, under that data house? Like, what do you think their thinking was to really get a handle on, we need to do more with our data?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, yeah, why do I exist, right? It's existential.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So I think it was something that the leadership team, my boss, our COO, Dan Cedar, I talked with him very transparently during the interview process, and he was transparent. He said, I'm not a data person. None of our leadership really are. We're really strong in certain areas: strategy, business, finance, product, but we always kind of didn't really know what to do with this data function, right? We were like, does it sit under engineering? Like, is it just a function of the business where we have analysts that can do this work? And they really weren't sure. So they kind of opened this role, and they had it open for quite some time. I think they looked at a pretty diverse array of candidates. But when I met with them, I really kind of could see what they were struggling with, right? And it looked like a familiar problem to me, which was not only like, where does data live, but also like, what should we even be focusing on, right? Like, how do we get value out of data, and ensure that we are being as data driven as possible, informing decisions, but not drowning in it, and also not, kind of breaking the bank, buying a whole kind of fancy stack of tools, some of which maybe you don't need. and or having competing sources of truth and things like that. So all the kind of classic data pitfalls. And when I was able to talk to them, I was able to kind of quickly understand, okay, like here are the gaps in your functionality. Here are some of the things that, you're not doing that have become kind of best practices and table stakes that are going to help you move faster, help you move with more confidence, and kind of get a lot of those insights and that single source of truth that everyone strives for. But, importantly, not as as an end itself, but as a means to an end to enable the business, right? So when you are looking at any business problem, when you're looking at any decision, you can actually leverage your data and know, hey, I'm making the right call here, versus kind of saying, we have a good gut feeling here. We're not really sure, but we're going to go with it. And that's a lot of the times the way early stage startups operate, just because they may not have that infrastructure set up to actually get the answer. They also might not have the time to kind of do that thoughtful analysis, right? But as you get bigger, getting those decisions wrong becomes more and more costly, right? And so as you kind of grow and need to execute with a little bit more precision, that becomes critical. But it's really it's really critical to make those investments early, right? If you don't build a lot of that infrastructure up front, right, later it can become quite expensive. So I think the long story short is they didn't really know exactly what they wanted to do, but they knew they wanted somebody to come in who had a bit of a vision for it and could build it out, to kind of keep up with the business, and then, become, I think another growth lever for the business, versus something that they previously were kind of like a little bit kicking the can on, right? So
Yeah. When I actually think about it, with some of the stuff that you've done with Espresso, Boxed, you've got M&A experience, you've got self-taught eng experience, let's just say data eng experience. You actually cover a couple of different brackets that some of the leadership team seemingly are really, really strong in. So that's probably quite a nice mix as well. But I totally agree. At the point of where the business was, probably start of this year, Jan 2024, they probably recognized, actually we need someone to take quite a strong foothold on this and like really establish this. So what did you walk into day one? What was the strategy as well from James's perspective walking in?
Yeah, good question. So I think walking in, data team was quite small, so we really just had one person kind of doing like BI and analytics, and one person doing data engineering. And at the time, I would say the company was maybe around 150 heads. So quite a small data team relative to the org size. And I think those folks had done a lot with a little, right? They had been incredibly lean, incredibly scrappy, and very innovative in kind of being able to get something strong stood up with very minimal resources and in a very short period of time. So give them a ton of credit for doing that and just trying to keep up, frankly, with the business growth, right? So you can imagine serving that whole org of customers, of data consumers, right? With such a small team, that's a big challenge. In terms of the stack, they had invested a lot in BigQuery, which was, kind of the central source of truth for everything, and had chosen Looker as a BI tool after a few kind of iterations through other tools that didn't quite fit the bill. But Looker was a little bit more of a governed data model. They liked that. They liked kind of moving towards more of a version controlled and like official kind of reporting tool. And, things were working, but things were also occasionally breaking. And the real challenge was like scaling it, right? So I think they had kind of built something that was working in the moment, but with every week, every month that would pass, you could see the cracks. And at a company that is growing anywhere from 10 to 20% month over month, you double every 3 to 6 months, right? So over the course of a year, you are becoming so much larger. And those problems that you say, hey, we'll figure that out later, they actually come quite fast. They're not like, oh, this is a 5-year problem, you have to really address it quickly. So I think my strategy was, hey, I need to definitely come in and one, we need a data modeling layer, right? So I'm a huge proponent of DBT. I've been using DBT since 2019, longtime supporter, and used it heavily at Box and at Espresso to great effect. We were able to just do things that we weren't able to do without it and really move quickly and bring that kind of best in class engineering mindset to data. So right off the bat, I was like, we need to implement DBT. That's going to solve a lot of our problems here in terms of core data modeling, having a source of truth, having trust, having version control, testing, documentation, all those things, none of which existed. And that's going to pay huge dividends. So that was a huge kind of initiative and something that we undertook quickly. And the executive team was really supportive of. Obviously there was some hesitation, some questioning, as is always healthy in the early stages, like, well, why not this other tool? Or how do other companies do it? And, I basically at the end of the day sat down with our CTO and our COO and said, hey, look, trust me, guys, like this, we kind of need to do this. And if you hired me, say, to kind of build out this vision, then, let me do my thing. And they were really supportive. And we were able to move really quickly. So I think it was really helpful for them to see the very quick dividends that it was able to pay. We also ended up choosing DBT Cloud, which allowed us to just move that much faster. I think, like I mentioned, we really only had one data engineer. We also had a very lean DevOps team. So standing up our own orchestration like Airflow and hosting our own doc site and things like that, which I'm traditionally used to in my previous roles, but we always had kind of larger data eng and DevOps teams to kind of help support us. Wasn't the case. And it was also clear that the priority was moving fast, right? So if we could leapfrog ahead by kind of buying or renting capabilities, we were absolutely going to do that. And that's what we did. And so that helped us get from, I would say, kind of 0 to 1 really quickly. And then from there, it kind of went back to the team and processes. So one, building a team was clearly a need. We had a ton of consumers, a lot of requests for analysis and reporting that were just kind of going completely unanswered, right? Kind of just disappearing into the ether. And it's not to say that, a data leader's objective is to make sure every ticket is addressed, right? That's not our goal. There's a lot of bad requests out there. There's a lot of things where you say, hey, we actually shouldn't do this analysis because nothing valuable is going to come from it. But there's also a lot of those that, those seemingly like innocuous tickets that you say, hey, that's low prio, we'll get to it at some point. Sometimes those morph into real problems because your business team, those are the people executing. They're on the ground and they know their little areas of the business really well. Sometimes when they point something out, which they say, hey, this looks weird, or it would be really cool if we could do this, it can turn into a bigger thread, which then kind of incepts an idea. And then you say, hey, yeah, we should build a whole model or service to handle that. And so that wasn't happening because the team was drowning, because they were so far underwater. and ignoring, I'd say, the vast majority of kind of inbounds. That kind of ability to not only handle the backlog, kind of be able to think outside the box and kind of build on ideas and say, hey, like we keep getting this similar request. How do we solve this problem more holistically? That wasn't really happening, but it was really a function of not having the time and space to be able to do that. So we immediately, opened some roles to kind of build out the analytics team, as well as to build out the kind of analytics engineering and data engineering teams as well. And also just kind of did what I would call a little bit of like an internal roadshow for the data team, saying, hey, like, here's who we are, here's how we work with you and your teams. Here's the problems we can solve for you. And making sure that people understood where we kind of fit in the company. We are very much that critical layer, that conduit between engineering and kind of, how things are built on the back end to how things are actually translated into business language and business insights. And so that is constantly our role, is kind of bridging that gap. And I think we were able to kind of get there quickly, build a lot of trust, which is critical. And then kind of become a team that people would say, hey, actually, we're just going to go to the data team. Previously, we might have gone to an engineering org, but we were able to kind of build that trust and say, hey, actually, now we can solve this problem. We can actually support a production use case, and really become, ingrained in a lot of these things versus kind of being this siloed data team where people are like, oh, we're not sure what those guys do.
Love that. I think what I deduce from, your first 12 months, you've put it really well and talked about it really well, is establishing some of the problem space that you have. You talk about rapid growth, quarter over quarter, and your business can almost double really quite quickly, and problems can unravel a lot quicker. Establishing the problems, addressing what tools you need in place and what data modeling you need in place, addressing what experience you need in the team. So really looking at it from a helicopter point of view and going, right, these are my 3, 4, 5, 6 problems. This is how I fix them, to be able to enable a team that can actually provide value. Going to your point of your road showing of the data team, if you like, of
right.
This is what we can do. So it's quite nice to see that evolution, not as simply put, I imagine, in practical terms as what you've just explained, though.
Yeah. There's obviously a ton of work involved there, right? Just from a technical perspective, there's a lot of foundational effort you have to put in there. And it was obviously a very lean team. So I think another kind of core tenet of Bilt's philosophy from a management kind of perspective is none of us are really true managers. And what I mean by that is you might be leading a team, you might have a VP or C-level title, but we are all kind of individual contributors in our own way. And we are all kind of expected to not only do the work and be there in the trenches with the team, but also to, level up our teams and ensure that they're, moving as fast as they can, that they're learning as much as they can. And really avoid falling into that trap of just being, oh, well, like I'm a manager, so, my hands are off the keyboard now, and I built out this team who's going to do everything. And, if I get a question, my first response is Slack my team and they'll answer it, right? Which I really appreciate, because I've always been somebody who loves, having my hands on the keyboard. I love writing code. I really find it rewarding. I think it's critical to kind of keep keep yourself sharp and to be able to make sure you understand everything your team is doing, and be able to jump in and help fill gaps when they're stretched thin. And I think it obviously sounds lofty, and I think a lot of companies say that, but Bilt, I would say we really live by those words. And across the org, no matter what team you're talking about, whether it's product, engineering, or the business side, everyone's really willing to kind of roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and be willing to jump in on really any problem, and lead by example. So I think it's really awesome to see, and I think that's how we keep the growth so fast, is that there's no kind of excuse for when something doesn't move as quickly as it should. If you have everyone on the team, focused and jumping in there, you'll get it done. That's the reality. You might not get it done on the perfect timeline. It might not be perfect and flawless with no bugs, but you will get a version of it out. And we really believe in that. So moving fast, iterating fast, following up quickly if things are not fully done. Those are all really critical. And I think that's how we keep the growth rate humming. And when we bring new folks on, I think it's really powerful because they're like, oh, wow, like you guys weren't kidding. Like you are going to move fast. And people often say, hey, I've only been here for 90 days, but I feel like I've been here for like a year already, because I think we're able to kind of level people up and get them onboarded much faster, because we really just push you into that environment. And we're always kind of pushing each other along.
That's an art in itself. You've touched on a couple of things, and we spoke about this in person. Encouraging other business units to think in a data mindset, and you've spoken about like a backlog of tickets where actually it pushes through some great ideas. It pushes through some problems a lot faster because they're discovered by different business units. And you've also done this with your road showing of what the data team can do, but that feels like a really important component to build any fast growth product company, is encouraging people to think in a data driven way, is something that you've strategically, alongside others, been able to do. Any tips around that?
Yes. I wouldn't say I have all the answers or perfect playbook there, and no two orgs are the same. But I think it all comes down to, you need to always put yourself in the shoes of your stakeholder, right? The second you stop doing that, you've lost the battle. And I think for me, it's always easy for me to do it because I started as effectively a stakeholder, right? I was on the finance side. I covered a lot of different business areas, and a lot of the times was, working with teams to say, hey, how do we actually answer this question? How do we pull this data? Is that number right? Are we, even looking in the right area if we're trying to like optimize something like the funnel? Like, where is the drop off, right? Like, where should we even be expanding our effort? So I naturally came at data from the perspective of effectively that business stakeholder saying, I'm trying to use data as a means to an end to solve this problem. And anytime we get a request, I kind of go back to that mindset and say, let me put myself in their shoes and think about what they're trying to solve, and then work backwards to say, here's how we're going to do it. Obviously, people will ask things and they won't understand the complexity of it, but that's not their problem, right? Like that's our problem. We need to figure out how to solve it, efficiently and effectively. And if we do need to, if it's going to be a lot more effort than maybe the person thought, we can explain to them, here's why, right? But frankly, a lot of the time the business stakeholder won't really care, right? You're like, I don't really know how you guys are doing this behind the scenes, but as long as you get it done and you get me my answer, I'm happy. And so I think always, kind of saying, okay, here's the problem, here's what we're trying to solve, working backwards from there. Make sure that you don't kind of over engineer things. It ensures that you aren't building for the sake of building, right? That everything you're doing is actually being used. And over time, when you're able to kind of crowdsource, like I was saying, all those requests, all those ideas, you can then start to really think about, oh, like I see this common theme occurring. We should try to solve this systematically now. So maybe we go build, a suite of data models that solves these kind of commonly asked questions. Or maybe it's, hey, we should actually invest in like a machine learning model to be able to predict this, or things like that. So I think when you constantly reinforce to the business team, hey, here's how we're adding value, here's how we're answering your question, maybe even here's how we're kind of preempting, and proactively saying, hey, here's something you might actually want to care about, right? That's where you start to really get that trust and people view you as a partner and you're helping them do their job better, right? That's how you build build that partnership. I would say, like, in the other direction, things to avoid are, set like if you do need to kind of deny a request, there's definitely an art to that. I think you need to be thoughtful. You can't just be like, this is not, this is stupid or this is not a good idea. You definitely obviously want to avoid that. That sounds like stating the obvious. But I think taking the time to spend with that stakeholder and say, hey, understand what you're asking. Maybe there's a slightly different way we can get there, or maybe there's something else that we should be looking at that would actually provide more value is helpful. And you can really kind of get through to people as to why you're not going to spend that time. And, also not getting too hung up on like, the ticketing and request process. It's important to keep things organized. It's important to remember what got done and kind of roughly how long it took, just from an efficiency standpoint. But ultimately, if you have a critical business need and you need to drop everything to go do it, like, you go do it. And that's also another way that you can build a lot of trust with those teams, right? Is just saying, hey, I'm right there with you. Your problem is my problem. Like, my number one priority is making sure you guys have what you need, and not kind of coming back with like, oh, this is a low priority thing and we need to scope it and we'll get back to you in 2 weeks. That's obviously not a good response. So
Yeah, I hear loud and clear communication, understanding the problem, building trust. I think is really important to enable that mindset. Love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Analytics engineering is something that I'd love to touch on. You can share some insights. See what I did? You can share some insights into analytics engineering, where the phrase comes from, what is it? Because a lot of people are using it nowadays. Right. And is it relatively new? Let's wait and see. But talk to us about analytics engineering.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say 10 years ago, term really didn't exist. DBT essentially invented this role. And they were really just putting a name on something that already existed, right? So I think in the, kind of mid 2010s, you had a lot of people like me who were like, yeah, maybe their finance background, maybe their consulting background, they found themselves in this data role. They were not traditionally trained engineers. Most of us didn't have computer science backgrounds or anything like that. We came more from the business side, from the analysis side, and we naturally gravitated kind of like upstream, closer to the source data, wanting to understand how we can actually pull that data ourselves, analyze it, transform it, etc. So DBT really was just saying, hey, there's this role. It's somewhere between the analyst and the data engineer that really acts as this critical layer to clean, model, transform the data, apply business logic, and apply engineering principles to that transformation process using Git, right? Using version control, using CI/CD, all those best practices, in order to really make data like a first-class citizen, right? And something that people took seriously, not just there's some back end and then there's this BI tool. And as long as people can pull their numbers from the BI tool, they don't care what happens in the middle. Frankly, no one understands, whatever. I think DBT did a really good job of saying, hey, actually, that transformation is actually arguably the most important part, because if you get that wrong, then you're going to have the wrong answers. You're going to have the wrong insights. And if we apply so much rigor on the engineering side, why are we not applying that rigor on the transformation process, right? It made no sense. And it was really because the persona of that individual didn't really fit. If that person was an analyst, they arguably didn't have kind of enough engineering know-how to do all those things, right? They were like, I can write the SQL, maybe I can write some Python, but like, I'm not used to a Git workflow. I'm not used to building CI/CD pipelines. I can't kind of, deal with orchestration tools. But DBT kind of provided this path to say, hey, those things actually aren't that scary. They're not that hard to do, especially when we've kind of built this open source framework for you. And we built out this community of folks who are like-minded and where you can share best practices and learn from each other. And they really empowered that kind of group to become this middleware, right? And so I think obviously hugely transformational. And then you saw from there kind of the evolution of the modern data stack more broadly. BigQuery and Snowflake kind of coming online. I guess Redshift first, but those ones quickly following. Companies like Fivetran popping up to kind of handle third-party data ingestion, reverse ETL products cropping up like Census and HighTouch. And really people starting to realize, hey, now that we've built this process and this role, this discipline of analytics engineering, the data warehouse has become way more valuable as an asset because that data is trusted, it's version controlled, we have a clean lineage, we understand how things work there. And now, rather than just saying, hey, this is just a reporting tool and maybe that sits with a business function, I think technology teams start to view it as, hey, this is really a core asset that we can use to power production use cases. And now when we want to go tackle things like machine learning, we can move with a lot more confidence because those data scientists, those ML engineers can be pulling from this clean data warehouse, and then we can be pushing some of those things into production, and really making that kind of data warehouse the hub, that core source of truth, and kind of an engine for the business. And none of that really would have been possible without kind of analytics engineering role and tools like DBT kind of enabling that. Because before that, no one had the confidence that was the right move, right? And so, yeah, I mean, a really cool thing for me to observe, as a practitioner and somebody who really is an analytics engineer, among other things, and I've worn that hat many times and continue to wear it. It's really cool. And I think the community and the ability to kind of like see and share best practices and going to like data meetups, talking on podcasts like this, like it's something that was a little unimaginable, 5-10 years ago. But really cool to kind of see how it's grown into its own kind of nice little niche in the world.
Yeah, and definitely, I feel like it has almost come full circle as well. DBT and analytics engineering underpins your strategy really,
Yeah,
and walking into Bilt, which I think is quite a nice way to actually round off the podcast in that sense, because that was one of the first things you wanted to look at some of your tooling, which would underpin your strategy. So it's quite nice to see. And you
yeah,
said you're an analytics person at heart.
yeah, that's right. Um, yeah, I think also just to kind of round out, I'd be remiss if we didn't, I guess, mention Gen AI at some point, right? But I think one of the really cool things we're excited about at Built is we feel like this year was a huge foundational year on the data side. We put in a great foundation, and now it's really about activating that. And so we've already done that in some really meaningful ways. We are using things like reverse ETL to push like smart ranking and personalization models into production. So that kind of powers what you see, why you see it, when you see it on the website and app. Um, but we're also experimenting with a lot of capabilities on the Gen AI front, which are all kind of really empowered once again by that by those investments we've made in the data warehouse in DBT, both from a productivity standpoint in terms of like tools like copilots to help you write code faster, make our team get rid of those redundant tasks of writing documentation, tests, and writing models. A lot of that can be automated now, and so we're investing heavily there. And we're also doing things like passing our data to LLMs so that they can actually kind of build things like user profiles and kind of more bespoke recommendations. So really exciting stuff on that front. And once again, it's all because we have confidence in what we're putting in, right? The old saying, garbage in, garbage out. It never really fails. It's the same with LLMs. If you can feed them something they understand, they have context on, you're going to get some really valuable things out of it. And so it's just been really cool to see how quickly you can move when you have the right foundation there. And then, when our leadership asks like, hey, could we do this? Like the answer is not like, yeah, maybe in 6 to 12 months. And like, it'll take us forever to figure out and say, yeah, actually in a few weeks, we could probably spin something up because we feel so confident in our foundations. And so, yeah, it's a nice place to be. I think we're at a nice point in our data journey. In many ways, just the beginning, but yeah, really, really excited about what the future holds. So.
Love it. Exciting to see. Before we wrap up, it'd be great to touch on, for what you can, what we should expect over the next 12 months from Bilt.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, we talked about a lot of the expansion, which I would say is both kind of like deeper in existing verticals. So in that kind of home vertical, mortgage will be coming, um, broader kind of integrations with platforms throughout that industry will also be coming. And so we really want to remove all the barriers for anyone to be able to pay with Bilt, right? That is our goal, is basically 100% coverage of the homes in the US, that no matter what kind of user you are, you have a way to pay with Bilt and earn rewards. So that is kind of our guiding principle there. And so you'll see a lot of progress on that in the next 12 months. Some major partnerships being announced. On the neighborhood front, I think we want to kind of go into additional verticals. So like I mentioned, um, restaurants, so like dining and pharmacy are the two focus areas for now, but there will be more partnerships coming on that front. And going into areas like delivery, gas, grocery, all of which is very exciting. Really, we want to just capture the share of wallet, right? Once
Bilt
again,
takeover.
we want Bilt to be top of mind, top of wallet, and we want you to be confident, like, hey, if I'm using Bilt, I'm always going to earn the best rewards, and those rewards are going to be the most valuable. And on the travel side, we have some really exciting stuff cooking up as well. So there will be, I think kind of a lot of exciting announcements on that front, and some cool new programs that we're going to be offering, especially to kind of our more elite status members like gold and platinum. So start to think about the world in terms of being able to truly compete with the Chase Sapphire Reserve and the Amex Platinums of the world in terms of like more concierge service and those exclusive experiences. So yeah, lots going on. No shortage of stuff for us to do on the data team. But yeah, exciting times.
Love it. I want to say a massive thanks for coming to join us. Legend of the game, legend of the data game, associated with DBT even, but a really good rundown into what Bilt are doing your first 12 months. They're defining a data strategy and the importance that you place on tools, people, processes, building trust. So a massive thanks for coming to join us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Elliot. Really enjoyed it.
Good man. And I think it goes without saying for people listening, Bilt have a lot going on next year. Go and check out their careers site. They look as if they're hiring across all sales, product, engineering, data verticals. So go and check the guys and girls out. And for people listening, all of your likes, shares, subscribership, and all that good stuff is massively appreciated. So again, massive thanks, James, and bye for now.
Thanks. So long.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no underscore. We've also got a website, which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.